Hello and welcome back to Koala Moon, children's bedtime stories and meditations designed to make bedtime a dream. Koko and Kira Go Stargazing by Luke Prendergast. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cozy wooden cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas. Koko, his parents and grandparents, and of course, his little sister, Kira the panda. Koko and Kira went to Sleepy Forest Elementary School, where they learnt about all kinds of things like mathematics and the history of the forest, and at exactly which time of year the berries that grew on all the different trees would be at their most ripe, plump and delicious. And in the evenings, after the sun had set and the sky above the forest had gone dark as ink, sometimes Koko and Kira liked to lie on their backs on the grassy patch outside the cabin, looking up at the twinkling stars. "What do you think they are?" Kira would ask. "What do you mean?" Koko would reply, frowning a little. "They're stars." "I know they're stars, silly," Kira would reply with a giggle. "But, I mean, what they really are, what stars are." And then they'd look up at the stars contemplatively, mulling over the question, which seemed stranger and stranger once she thought about it. "Maybe they're fireflies that flew up there and got stuck," Koko proposed. "Or the eyes of some huge far-off creature," suggested Kira, looking down at us and blinking. "Or they could be burning balls of gas, billions and billions of miles away," said Koko. But they both clutched their bellies and laughed at that. That was such a ludicrous idea. One evening, when they had finished feasting on a delicious dinner of eucalyptus pie that their mum had made them, Koko and Kira lay outside, staring up at the stars, when Koko was struck by an idea. "I know how we can find out about the stars," he said. "How?" Kira asked. "We have to go and ask Cuthbert, of course." Kira's eyes opened wide and she nodded. Cuthbert. Of course that was who they should go and ask. Cuthbert the camel was one of the oldest and wisest creatures who'd ever lived in Sleepy Forest. He had 2 humps on his back, in which, he said, he could store water for many days, and a sandy-coloured coat, and a sagging, hairy-bottomed lip that jiggled whenever he was munching on grass, which he often was. He was also, admittedly, a little bit grouchy, but that was understandable since he'd been plodding around the forest for such a long time. His feet must be pretty sore. Cuthbert's great passion was studying the skies. He called it celestial phenomena. But those kinds of long words were often pretty tricky for Koko and Kira to wrap their heads around. What he meant by celestial phenomena was the stars and planets and comets and asteroids and all the other bits and bobs that floated about up there in the great big above. You see, Cuthbert was terribly, terribly clever. His brain was like a huge castle, every room chock full of all sorts of interesting information. Once, Cuthbert had even helped Koko out when the moon had passed in front of the sun and got stuck. He'd explained to Koko that what he was seeing was a solar eclipse, but that something had gone wrong because the moon wasn't supposed to get stuck like that. And then he'd helped Koko unstick it. So Cuthbert wasn't only clever, he was a pretty considerate camel too. What's more, Koko told Kira, was that Cuthbert must have almost finished the brand new observatory he'd been working on for some time. The structure, which he was calling the Sleepy Forest Stargazing Observatory, was being built in a large clearing in the middle of the forest. He was kitting it out with the latest high-tech telescope. "And he told me," Koko said, "that once it was done, we should go and check it out. What do you think?" "I think we should definitely go check it out," said Kira. Koko and Kira went back inside the log cabin to tell their mum that they were off to visit Cuthbert the camel. "What a wonderful idea," their mother said. "Mind if I join too?" And so the three of them went to put on their jackets, for it was a little chilly out that evening, and before long they had all set off through the twilit sleepy forest. All the other creatures were getting ready for bed. They passed birds settling down in their nests high in the branches, a family of hedgehogs plumping up the soft, dry leaves in their hollow at the foot of an oak tree, and they waved good-night to Bread and Butter, the two ducks who lived in the reeds on Sleepy River. The light was fading slowly, and up through the trees Kira could see that the sky was a darkening lilac colour, but she couldn't see any stars. When she voiced this concern, her mum patted her on the head. "Don't worry, Kira," she said. "The stars will come." And sure enough, as they turned around the trunk of a particularly grand sycamore and towards the clearing where Sleepy Forest Stargazing Observatory loomed up, Kira noticed that the sky was now speckled with an infinite array of sparkling stars. Even though it was brand new, the observatory looked like an old building. It was made of pale stone, with columns at the front and a big dome on top. And at the ornate front doors stood Cuthbert the camel, looking pretty proud of himself. Cuthbert lifted a hoof and waved them welcome. "Hello, Cuthbert," they said one by one, and Koko added that he thought the Sleepy Forest Stargazing Observatory looked pretty cool indeed. "Why, thank you, Koko," said Cuthbert. "It's taken me some time to build it, stone by heavy stone. But here we are. It's done. And I'm very glad that you've come for the grand unveiling with me." He lifted his head and looked seriously up at the sky. "The stars are out in their millions tonight," he said. "It will be quite some show. Are you ready? You'll be the first Sleepy Foresters to try out the new Stargazing Observatory." "Oh, yes," said Koko, and Kira said, "We can't believe how lucky we are to be the first to try it out. Thanks, Cuthbert." Koko, Kira and their mum followed Cuthbert through the great doors and into the observatory. Inside it was cool, and softly glowing lamps flickered on the walls, sending shadows dancing around the large circular room. The dome rose up over their head, and in the middle of the room was the strangest contraption Koko or Kira had ever seen. "That doesn't look like a telescope," Kira said, furrowing her eyebrows skeptically. "At least," she added, careful to make sure she was being polite, "not like the ones they showed us in the textbooks at school." "Ah," replied Cuthbert agreeably. "No. In fact, it won't look like anything you've seen anywhere, young Kira. No more putting your eye to a lens and squinting to see the stars. No, no. I have been working on this invention for some time, and it is the most newfangled, high-tech piece of machinery anyone in Sleepy Forest will ever have set their eyes upon. No more looking up at the stars through a telescope. This, my stargazing observatory, will bring the stars down to you. Cuthbert beckoned them over. Come and take a look, he said. Kira followed Koko and her mum, but she still wasn't quite convinced that this machine was high-tech or newfangled, whatever that might mean. It looked, as far as she was concerned, a bit like a ginormous bed. Yes, a bed. A big, black, rather soft-looking pad was spread out across the floor in the middle of the observatory floor, with a bunch of cushions that looked as though they were designed to rest your head on. The weird bit was that above the bed, rising all the way up to the top of the dome, were layers and layers of glass. Glass so thin that from certain angles it disappeared entirely, and you couldn't see it at all. The only high-tech part of the whole strange contraption that Kira could see were a series of buttons and levers bunched together by the side of the black pad. And yet, as she approached the invention, Kira began to notice, or rather, she began to feel, that there was something truly magical about it. There was a zone of energy around it that made a quiet excitement flood through her and flutter in her chest. The sheets of glass, it turned out, weren't just plain glass at all. Each of them, as she looked at them, had their own particular quality, swirling with colours as though pink or milky white or pale blue galaxies were caught on their surfaces. How does it work? Koko asked Cuthbert. Well, said the camel, let me show you. Everyone, lie down here, looking up towards the sky. Koko, Kira, and their mum did as they were instructed, lying on their backs so that through the sheets of glass they could see the curved dome of the observatory ceiling. Cuthbert took his place too. He asked if they were ready before pressing a button. With a creak, the dome ceiling unfurled, revealing the brilliant sky behind it. Wow, whispered Kira. The sky above Sleepy Forest was pitch black and full of dazzling stars, like someone had tipped a jar of sprinkles over it. They burned and blinked high above them. The view was spectacular, but it was the same view that Koko and Kira gazed up at when they lay on their backs outside their little log cabin. Hold on there 1 moment, Cuthbert said. Are we ready for the magic? Koko and Kira held their breaths. In their heads, they were both repeating, Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Here we go, Cuthbert murmured, and he pulled a lever. And then something truly miraculous happened. To Koko and Kira, it no longer felt as though they were lying in the new stargazing observatory in Sleepy Forest. Instead, it felt as though they had floated up into the night sky, and were now soaring through space itself. Asteroids and meteors and comets flew past them. The blazing stars zoomed towards them. Closer and closer they came, spilling their bright light all around. And then, all of a sudden, they were there. The stars were floating all around them. "Crikey," whispered Koko. "We wondered whether the stars were fireflies stuck up on the ceiling of the sky, and we wondered if they were balls of burning gases millions of miles away. But we never imagined this." "No," Kira agreed. "Never." "Well, well, well," said Cuthbert. "These, kids, are the constellations." For all around them swirled creatures whose bodies were made out of stars. Koko saw a ram with curled horns go charging through the observatory, followed by a shoal of shimmering fish. A swan made out of starlight spread its silvery wings, and a crab clicked its claws together as it scuttled across the stone floor. "It really does bring the stars down to you," whispered Kira, looking around in awe. "Why, of course," said Cuthbert gruffly, "just as I said it would. And," he added, "what's more, you can interact with them too. Go ahead, give it a go." Kira had spotted a brilliant star-studded horse pawing the ground in the corner of the observatory. Carefully, she got up from the floor and took a few steps over to it. Her feet felt very light indeed, and with each step she floated a few feet across the room, as though she were no longer on solid earth, but walking on the moon. The horse was no normal horse, but had a pair of bright white wings sprouting out of its back. It ruffled its feathers as Kira approached. "Hello," she said. "I'm Kira, the panda bear, and who, may I ask, are you?" The winged horse gave her a toothy smile. "I am Pegasus," he replied, "guardian of the skies. I fly around at night, flashing my stars, making sure all the world is safe." Kira asked Pegasus if she could touch him, because she had never touched a starry constellation before. "I can do even better than that," Pegasus replied. "Hop on. I can take you for a ride." Kira looked around at her mum, who gave her an encouraging nod, and so, holding on firmly to Pegasus's neck, she swung herself up onto his back. Pegasus's body was warm and silky. It was the strangest feeling in the world, sitting right on top of starlight. Looking down, she could almost see the floor of the observatory through his body, but she felt safe enough. "Ready?" Pegasus asked. "Ready," Kira told him. Pegasus spread his huge wings, gave them a flap, and up they soared into the sky. They flew out of the open dome of the observatory and up into the dense night hanging above Sleepy Forest. Kira gripped on tight and looked down below her at the trees waving their branches in the gentle breeze, as though They were waving hello to her. The forest stretched out for ever and ever. She had never seen her home from the sky before, and marvelled at how big and beautiful it was. Pegasus flew her high up into the sky and did a few somersaults in the air. As they sailed back down towards the observatory, Kira wondered whether any of the other creatures who lived in Sleepy Forest was looking up from their beds just then and wondering if they were seeing a falling star. "Thank you, Pegasus," Kira said once she jumped off his back. The star horse gave her a low bow, and Kira gave him a big hug of gratitude. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Stargazing Observatory, Koko had made his own starry friend. While Kira had been flying through the night sky with Pegasus, a shimmering star-spangled eagle had landed in the observatory, and in its arms it carried a strange-looking stringed instrument, like a miniature harp. "That's Lyra," Cuthbert the camel explained to him. "The musical eagle. They say she strums her tunes for the whole universe to enjoy up there. Go ahead and say hello to her." So Koko went up to the eagle and introduced himself. "Hi there, Koko," the eagle said. "My name's Lyra." Koko told Lyra that he liked the look of her musical instrument very much. He had his own ukulele at home, he told her, which he liked to take to Sleepy Forest Elementary School to play with his classmates. One day he'd like to be in his very own music band. "What kind of instrument is that exactly?" he asked her. "This," said the eagle, presenting the instrument with a flourish of her wing, "is called a lyre. That's how I got my name, Lyra. Get it?" Koko asked Lyra if she'd show him how to play the lyre. "Of course I can," she replied. Then she began to pluck the strings with a delicate claw and strum them with a sweeping wing. The most beautiful sound of music filled the whole observatory. It sounded to Koko like magical tinkling rain. "Here," Lyra said when she'd finished her tune. "You have a go now." "Really?" Koko asked her. "Really." With a trembling hand, Koko reached out for the lyre which the eagle held out to him. The lyre seemed to be made of pure starlight, and Koko was sure his paw would pass right through it. But it didn't. His fingers closed around the cool handle of the lyre. "Go on," Lyra the eagle encouraged him, "just like I did it." So Koko took his paw and strummed the lyre's strings once. That same melodious song swam from the vibrating strings. Now he plucked them with his claws or strummed them with his paws, and the whole observatory was filled once again with that beautiful music. "Wow," Koko said. "I've played real guitar. I've played air guitar. But I've never, ever played star guitar before." While Koko played, Kira and his mum had a little boogie around the observatory. Even Cuthbert joined in with his own shimmying dance. When he'd finished playing, Koko handed the lyre back to the eagle. Thanks for letting me play, he said. Lyra nodded her head. And you let me know if you ever need an extra member for that band of yours. And spreading her glittering eagle wings, she took off to the skies. The four of them lay back down on the soft black pad and looked up through the layers of misty glass. The stars were still swirling about the sky, falling down towards them. Ah, said Cuthbert, here come a couple of my favourites, Mama Bear and her baby cub. Just as he'd described, after a few moments, a great white bear, her thick coat shimmering with stardust, was prowling around the observatory. Around her feet played her little cub, with 2 dark stars for eyes. He jumped this way and that, bouncing onto his mother's big paws and then jumping off. At last, though, the little bear cub gave a big yawn and curled up in the corner of the observatory. His mother noticed that he'd got tired, and she gave a big yawn too. Then she went and lay beside her little star cub, so that he could nuzzle close to her warm body and fall asleep. Oh, listen, Koko and Kira's mum whispered to Cuthbert. The baby bear is snoring gently. It seems that even the stars have bedtimes, and it looks like it's long past that little cub's. And it looks like it's past Koko and Kira's bedtimes too, replied Cuthbert, nodding his head towards the little koala and the little panda bear. Koko and Kira's mum turned around and was surprised to see that her 2 children were now fast asleep, curled up in Cuthbert's stargazing observatory. Their chests were rising and falling gently, the fur on their chins rippling where their sleepy breath was coming raggedly out of their noses. In his sleep, Koko rolled over and slipped a little paw into Kira's so that he could hold it. Their mother's heart was filled up by a swell of love and pride for her children. I should get them home to bed, she whispered to Cuthbert. But do you mind if we stay in the observatory a little longer? I enjoy watching the stars. It makes me feel very much at peace. Cuthbert, of course, said she was more than welcome to stay as long as she liked. So the 2 of them lay staring up at the stars, which swirled and swayed up above them. They saw Pegasus gliding through the atmosphere. They heard the sound of the eagle's lyre echoing through the heavens. They stared up into the great expanse of sky, while around them 4 bears slept soundly. Koko the koala, Kira the panda, and the starry mama bear and her baby cub. They stayed watching the stars until Koko's mother herself began to yawn. She said her goodnights to Cuthbert and lifted her children into her arms. Then she carried them back through the quiet forest, led back to her log cabin by the light of the stars. This is Thalia's Jar of Fallen Stars by Alicia Ainsley. It was a bright, starry night, and a half-moon floated gracefully in the sky. A dark navy blue blanket wrapped itself around the world, and millions of tiny, sparkling stars shone exuberantly in the air. 9-year-old Thalia sat on her windowsill and peeped through the curtains to gaze out into the night. She looked around and observed all of the houses down her street. Warm golden lights glowed from within their windows, and she watched as a couple of lights were put out as the people who lived there retreated to bed for the evening. The street lights hovered above the pavements, casting shadows across the ground. Thalia caught sight of a little hedgehog emerging from a hedge and toddling its way across the road. She followed the little hedgehog with her eyes and smiled fondly as it made its way into her front garden. She liked the idea of a cute little prickly hedgehog taking refuge in her family's garden. Thalia pulled her knees up to her chin and wrapped her arms around her legs, holding them tight. She rocked gently back and forth, dreamily gazing out into the world. Her white cat, Bella, jumped up onto the other side of the windowsill and sat opposite her. Bella, too, turned to look out of the window, and they both admired the peaceful, still night. Thalia noticed a star in the sky sparkling brighter than all the others. It blinked so prominently that it looked as if it was winking at her. Thalia closed her eyes and pictured the star in her mind. She breathed in deeply and sighed out through her nose. Then she began to recite, "Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might, have the wish I wish tonight." Thalia scrunched up her nose and focused extra hard as she made her wish on the star. Bella the cat let out a little meow, drawing Thalia's attention back to the room. She reached forward and petted Bella on the head. Bella purred adoringly. All of a sudden, Thalia's attention was drawn back outside by a strange noise. She could hear a popping sound. Pop, 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 she heard. Thalia pressed her face up against the window pane and looked out into the street. She couldn't see anything that could be making the strange noise. There was nobody there, and no cars on the road either. But then she heard the sound again. Pop, pop, pop. Thalia's eyes lifted to the sky, and she gasped with surprise. With every pop, stars in the sky were bursting and falling down to the ground. Thalia watched in amazement as stars began to fall down onto the path below, beneath the light of one of the street lights. Bella the cat spotted the incredible incident too and was meowing excitedly. Thalia hopped down off the windowsill and slipped her slippers on. Then she tiptoed downstairs so as not to disturb anyone sleeping and opened the front door of her house. She walked out into her garden and looked over the garden hedge to see more clearly. Her eyes had not deceived her. There really were fallen stars glittering on the pavement on the other side of the road. Thalia heard a rustling in the bush beneath her, and she looked down to see the hedgehog that she had spotted earlier emerging. The prickly little fella was peeking out its little nose and snuffling around to see what all the excitement was about. Thalia was bursting with exhilaration, and she raced back upstairs to her bedroom and grabbed a jar off the side of the dresser. She tipped out the hair ties and hair clips that were stored inside until there was nothing left, and she dashed back down the stairs. Bella the white cat followed behind, intrigued to see the fallen stars for herself. Thalia and Bella walked out into the street and stopped at the edge of the pavement. Thalia looked both ways to check that no cars were coming, and then she crossed the road with Bella and the curious hedgehog in tow. Once they all reached the other side, they wandered over to the street lamp that towered above the fallen stars. The fallen stars lay on the ground, glittering and twinkling. They emitted a very subtle jangling sound, as if they were speaking to one another. Thalia bent down to take a closer look at the fallen stars, and Bella and the hedgehog crawled up closer and gave them a sniff. Bella got so close to one of the stars that she sniffed a bunch of stardust up her nose. She twitched her nose irritably and promptly sneezed glittery stardust everywhere. The curious hedgehog scampered away behind Thalia, surprised by Bella's sneezing outburst. Thalia giggled as Bella swiped at her nose, trying to get rid of the remaining tickly dust. Thalia wondered what to do with the poor fallen stars. She couldn't just leave them there on their own. Somebody might step on them. So she decided to scoop them all up and protect them in her empty jar. She could keep them there until she came up with an idea for how to get them back up into the sky. One by one, Thalia picked up each of the shimmering fallen stars and softly placed them in her glass jar. Thalia, Bella, and the hedgehog crossed back over the road, back to Thalia's garden, with the fallen stars safely cradled in the jar. The hedgehog retreated back into the hedge, while Thalia and Bella went back indoors. Back in her bedroom, Thalia placed the jar of fallen stars on the windowsill so that they could see their home in the sky from there. She whispered to the stars, "Don't worry, I'll find out what to do with you. Hopefully, I can send you back home soon to where you belong." As if the fallen stars could understand what Thalia was saying to them, they started to radiate with a pulsating glow. Thalia assumed that the stars were saying thank you in their own magical way. Thalia slept that night with the light of the jar of fallen stars casting a cozy glow around her bedroom. They were like the world's best nightlight. Bella the cat observed the stars all night long to make sure they didn't go anywhere. The next day, Thalia set to work trying to find out what to do with the fallen stars. Unsure of where to begin, Thalia asked her older brother Magnus for help. Magnus was 11 years old, and he had just recently started secondary school. He was the smartest person that Thalia knew, so she was sure that he would be able to help. Thalia showed Magnus the jar of fallen stars, and he stared at them in amazement. He tapped on the glass, and the stars began to glow brighter in response. He stepped back and said, "Wow, Thalia, you are so lucky to have found so many fallen stars at once. You could wish for so many things on all these stars." Thalia was confused. What did he mean? She knew that she could wish upon stars in the sky, but did they not lose their wishing magic once they had fallen to earth? Magnus informed her that, on the contrary, fallen stars were even more powerful than stars in the sky. He told her that if you wish on a fallen star, then your wish is certain to come true. Thalia looked at the jar of fallen stars with wonder. She counted them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There were 6 fallen stars in the jar. That meant there were 6 wishes to be used. Magnus begged Thalia to let him wish on one of the stars. He had always wanted his very own bike so that he could go for rides with his friends, and with the magic of one of the stars, he could achieve his dream. Thalia didn't hesitate. Of course he could have one of the stars to wish upon. She reached into the jar of stars and picked one of them out and handed it over to Magnus. He held the fallen star in his hand and gazed at it, totally mesmerized by its magic. He held the star firmly in his palm and felt its warm, mystical energy radiate out into his body. He closed his eyes and made his wish. "I wish for a green bike with orange handlebars and a black seat," he whispered to the star hopefully. Thalia watched on as the star began to sparkle in his clenched hand. Then, in a puff of smoke, the star disappeared. Thalia and Magnus looked around the room, but there was no sign of a bike, and there was no sign of the star he had wished on either. Magnus's shoulders dropped defeatedly. Maybe the wish hadn't worked after all. Then, out of nowhere, they heard a ringing sound. It was the sound of a bell. They both rushed to the window and looked outside. To their utter disbelief, there, stood on the front lawn, was a green bike with orange handlebars and a black seat. Magnus ran downstairs and out into the garden delightedly. He whooped for joy as he hopped on his new bike and started pedaling around the garden. Thalia watched on and laughed with glee. She couldn't believe that Magnus's wish had come true. Thalia looked back at the jar of fallen stars. There were now only 5 of them left. 5 wishes were left for her to use. But how should she use them? Thalia spent the rest of the day thinking carefully about what to use the remaining fallen stars for. She could wish for anything she wanted. It was a great privilege, and she wanted to make the best out of it. Thalia went through her day, trying to think if there was anything that she wanted. She could wish for a wardrobe full of new clothes, or wish for a new cat friend for Bella. But she already had enough clothes that she liked, and Bella was quite content with being the only cat in the house. Thalia had always wanted to learn how to play the guitar, so she could wish for perfect guitar playing skills. But she wanted to learn how to do it herself. She didn't want to cheat or fast track her learning. She wouldn't feel any accomplishment that way. She could wish for a super smart brain so that she would gain the top grades in her class at school. But again, there was no fun in it if she hadn't worked for it. Thalia went to bed that night and sat on the windowsill as usual. This time, with Bella the cat at her feet, she held the jar of fallen stars in her arms. She was beginning to notice that the stars shined brighter at night. Thalia looked up into the sky and saw the big star that she had noticed the night before. Next to the big star was a new star, one that she hadn't noticed before. It shone just as brightly, if not more so, and it blinked so much that it looked like it was winking at her. Thalia looked down and noticed the little hedgehog emerge from the hedge and wander around her garden. The little fella hadn't left yet. In fact, he seemed to quite like it at their house. Thalia wondered what it must be like to wander around looking for a new place to lie down and rest each evening. That's when she had an idea for one of her wishes. Thalia picked out one of the stars from the jar and held it in her hand. She closed her eyes and whispered to the star, "I wish that the hedgehog in my garden had its own little house to sleep in every night." In a poof, the star disappeared, and when Thalia looked back outside, she saw that a small wooden house had popped up in the corner of their garden, right next to the hedge. The hedgehog was crawling over to it eagerly. The small wooden house had a ramp that led up to its circular front door and a pointed thatched roof on the top. The hedgehog scurried inside, and she saw it settle itself down in the dark hole within, no doubt getting comfortable in its nice warm bed. Thalia smiled and thanked the fallen stars for their help. She glanced back up into the sky and gasped. Next to the two brightly shining stars was a new one. The third star glistened and shone proudly in the night sky. Thalia made a realization. When the fallen stars had been wished upon, they returned back up to their rightful place in the sky. So all she had to do to return them all home was make wishes on them. Thalia went to sleep that night with big plans for the next day and the rest of the fallen stars. When she awoke, Thalia set to work looking for people who could use some help from the magic of the fallen stars. As it was a sunny day, Thalia and her family walked into town to get ice creams. As they entered the ice cream parlor, Thalia noticed a man talking to the lady at the till. The man spoke in hushed tones, but Thalia could just about make out what he was saying. The man was very hungry and had ordered some food. However, when he had come to pay, he had realized that he had forgotten his wallet and had no money on him. Thalia felt sorry for the man. He clearly had made an honest mistake and found himself in a spot of bother. He needed a dash of kindness in his day. Luckily, Thalia had packed a couple of the fallen stars into her pockets that morning for opportunities such as this. Thalia pulled out a star and held it in her hand. She whispered her wish to the star, and it disappeared in a poof of glittery smoke. All of a sudden, the man's pocket began to fill up with money. Lots and lots of money. Thalia watched on as the man's eyes grew wide, and he reached into his jean pocket to check if his eyes were playing tricks on him. But when he held the money in his hands, he realized that it was really happening. The man scooped up the money in his hands and kissed it gratefully with tears in his eyes. He shouted the words, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," into the air, and Thalia watched on with a happy heart. The man was now able to pay his bill with no problem. She was glad that she'd been able to use the fallen star's magic for a good deed. As Thalia and her family walked up to their table in the ice cream parlor, she caught Magnus's eye, and he gave her a thumbs up. Later, while Thalia, Magnus, and their parents were enjoying their ice creams, Thalia heard a little voice begin to sob. She looked over her shoulder and saw a little girl who couldn't have been older than 3 years old had popped her balloon. It had been a special balloon that floated in the air, and it was shiny silver with pictures of princesses on it. The little girl looked very disappointed as she held the drooping string and stared at the deflated balloon on the ground. Thalia jumped into action. She pulled another of the stars out of her pocket and whispered a wish to the star. The star disappeared, and just as it did, the little girl's balloon magically reinflated itself and floated back up into the air. The little girl's face lit up with delight and amazement, and she jumped up and down, laughing. Thalia laughed too as she looked on. It felt really nice to do so many good things for other people. Seeing other people happy made her feel happy too. But Thalia's work wasn't finished yet. She still had 2 more stars to return to the sky, which meant 2 more people to grant wishes for. On their way home, Thalia's parents chatted about how much they wanted to go on holiday this year, but they simply couldn't afford it at the moment. Thalia's mother professed how much she wanted to go somewhere hot and sunbathe on the beach and play in the sea. Meanwhile, her father admitted that he would love to go somewhere with lots of activities to do, such as snorkeling and hiking up mountains. They both wanted some time off work to relax as a family. Maybe next year, they said. Once they were all home, Thalia looked into the jar in her bedroom. Only 2 stars remained. She could probably use just 1 star to help out her parents and give them the rest and relaxation that they needed. They worked so hard to provide for Thalia and her brother. They definitely deserved a holiday. Thalia picked out a star and held it in her hand. She shut her eyes tight and made a wish. I wish that my parents could go on the holiday of their dreams, she whispered. The star began to glitter and shimmer, and it faded away in a plume of sparkly smoke. Thalia went back downstairs. She didn't know how this wish would play out. She hoped that her parents hadn't disappeared already on their holiday. But when she crept downstairs, she found her parents sitting in the living room like normal. Then the phone began to ring. Thalia's father picked up the phone and said, "Hello." He listened to the voice on the other end of the phone, and his eyes began to bulge with disbelief. "Are you sure it's for us?" he asked, bewildered. He finished talking to the person on the phone and then hung up the call. He rushed over to Thalia's mother and explained that he had just received a call from his boss. His boss had offered them all a free holiday to Fiji as a treat for him working so hard recently. Thalia's parents couldn't believe their luck. They cheered and hugged each other and called for the kids to join them. They told Thalia and Magnus the good news, and they all celebrated together. They would fly the very next week, so they had all better start packing soon. Thalia looked at the relieved, joyful expressions on her parents' faces. They did work so hard, and they deserved a break. Thalia was very grateful to the fallen stars for giving her family this opportunity. That night, Thalia sat on her windowsill with Bella by her side and the last fallen star in her lap. She looked out at the night sky and saw that the other fallen stars had returned back up into the sky, and they were shining so brightly and cheerfully next to each other. Thalia just needed to find one more wish to make, and then the last star could rejoin its friends. Magnus knocked on her door and came into her bedroom. He asked, "Have you decided what to use your last wish for yet?" Thalia shook her head. She didn't know what to wish for, but she wanted to use it for something good. Magnus asked Thalia what she had wished for already. She explained how she had asked for a hedgehog house for their little prickly friend in the garden, and how she had asked for money for the man in the ice cream parlour. She had fixed the little girl's balloon, and she had wished for her parents to go on a much-needed holiday. Not to mention Magnus had got his dream bike. Magnus listened and frowned. He looked at the remaining star in the jar and said, "Thalia, you haven't made one single wish for yourself. You should wish for something that you want. That can be your last wish." Thalia shook her head and said that she had thought about it already, but she didn't want or need anything. She already had everything she could wish for, and anything else that she wanted, she was willing to work for instead. Thalia was willing to be patient. Magnus returned to his bedroom and left Thalia on her own again. The remaining star jingled in the jar, as if it was encouraging her to make her final wish. Thalia sighed and looked at her beloved white cat, Bella. That's when she had an idea of what to do with the final wish. Bella had been there when Thalia had found the fallen stars and helped her collect them. It didn't seem fair that Bella hadn't had an opportunity to make a wish on one of the stars, too. Thalia reached into the jar one last time and picked out the last fallen star. She held it out to Bella and whispered, "Make a wish, Bella. This one is for you." Bella gazed at the star in Thalia's hand, and its stardust reflected in her glassy black eyes. Then the star disappeared, and Thalia watched as a final star burst into the sky alongside the others. Thalia had succeeded in her mission. She had managed to return all of the fallen stars to their place in the night sky. She was elated. "They look beautiful, don't they?" she heard a sweet, husky voice say. Thalia turned to look at Bella. The fluffy white cat was staring out at the stars whimsically. Thalia was confused and murmured, "Bella, did you just say something?" Bella the cat looked up at Thalia and smiled. "I did," the little white cat replied. "I'm going to be saying a lot more, too, from now on." Thalia started to laugh uncontrollably. Bella had wished for the ability to speak. This was going to be so much fun. Thalia and Bella thanked the stars for their wishing magic and spent the rest of the evening chatting away. Lots of wonderful things had come from their mystical discovery 2 nights ago. But the best thing, by far, was Thalia's new talking cat, Bella. How the Moon Found His Glow, by Gillian Rogerson. Once upon a time, there was a young moon who lived in a magical universe far, far away. It was a universe made of many moons and millions of stars. The young moon loved playing games with the other moons, and they often chased each other in and out of the glimmering stars. He was a happy moon and spent a lot of time smiling and laughing. The little moon was just like the other moons. But then, one day, when he was having a particularly fun time with his friends, something strange happened to him. He began to glow. His friends stopped what they were doing and gazed at his gentle light in wonder. They told him how beautiful his glow was. The moon smiled shyly and thanked them, and then he glowed a little brighter. As time went by, the young moon got used to his glow. He realized that he glowed more brightly when he felt happy. Sometimes, if he wasn't feeling so happy and his glow dimmed, he would think about all his lovely friends and how beautiful the sky was, and his glow would soon return, shining even brighter than before. His moon friends loved looking at his gentle light, and they said seeing the moon's glow always made them feel warm and happy inside. Their kind words made the moon glow even more. One day, the oldest moon in the magical universe asked to see him. When he arrived at her starry home in the sky, she told the young moon that his beautiful light was a special one, and he should consider sharing it with a planet which would greatly benefit from his soothing glow. As there were only moons and stars in the magical universe where the young moon lived, he was confused and asked what a planet was. The old moon replied, "Our universe isn't the only one. There are other universes out there beyond ours. A lot of them have planets, and some of those planets have moons that travel slowly around them. Those moons have a special light, just like yours, and they shine their light over their planets." The young moon said it would be wonderful to shine his light over a planet, but how would he find the right one for him? The wise moon suggested he travel through the universes and have a look at many planets until he found the one that he loved. "But how will I know if I love a planet?" the young moon asked. The older moon smiled and replied, "You will know because you'll glow more brightly than you ever have done before, and you will feel a love for the planet deep inside you." The young moon thought about her words. Exploring other universes would be fun, and if he found a planet to call his home, well, that would be just wonderful. Yet he still had some concerns. He said, "I will travel to other universes where the planets are, but if I don't want to stay with any of them, can I come back?" "Yes, of course," the older moon said gently. "There is always a home for you here, but something tells me that the perfect planet is out there just waiting for you." The young moon smiled and said, "Really? Waiting for me? I'd better get going then." The older moon wished him luck and said, "Please send me a shooting star message when you have found your planet, and I'll let the other moons know about your new home. If you like, we can visit you now and again. Enjoy your adventure." The moon said he would. He glowed brightly, said goodbye, and headed off to find his friends. He told his friends where he was going and why. They were very pleased for their friend and wished him lots of luck. They said they would definitely visit him and couldn't wait to see his special planet. The young moon went on his way through the sparkling skies of the magical moon universe. He wasn't sure which direction he should go in, so he stopped at the side of a group of shimmering stars and asked for their help. The stars were happy to help him and led the moon towards a cloud of twinkling stardust. They told him the cloud was an extra magical one, and it was a portal into another universe, one that had many planets. The moon went through the cloud of twinkling stardust and found himself in another universe. It had just as many stars as the one he had left, and he saw some moons too. But there were some large globes moving slowly in the sky. He had never seen anything like them before. He asked a nearby star if they were planets. "They certainly are," the friendly star replied. She twinkled brightly as she looked at the glowing moon. "I've never seen you here before." The moon smiled and explained why he was there. The star asked if he would like some help choosing a planet. She had lived alongside them for a very long time and knew a lot about them. The moon said he would like that very much, and he thanked the kind star. The star twinkled some more and said he was very welcome. She took him over to the nearest planet, which was made of pale pink crystals. She told the moon what the planet's name was, but it was such a long name that the moon instantly forgot it and was too shy to ask the star to repeat it. The twinkling star told the young moon that the other moons travelled slowly around their planets in a circle, and suggested he do that with the crystal planet to see how he felt about it. She offered to go with him. The glowing moon and the twinkling star circled the pale pink planet. It didn't take long because it was only a small planet. Once they had completed their journey around the planet, the star asked the moon how he felt about it. The moon said, "It's a lovely planet, but, well," he didn't know how to put words to his feelings. The star smiled and said, "It's not making you glow, is it?" The moon gave her a small smile and said, "No, it wasn't." "Never mind," the star said. "There are plenty of other planets here. And if you don't find the right one, I know how to travel to other universes where there are even more planets. I've been to those places before and spoken to many planets. They're so very friendly. I'm sure you'll find the perfect one for you. And if you'd like, I'd be happy to go with you and help you find your special planet." The moon glowed at her kind offer and said he would love that, thank you. The twinkling star and the glowing moon continued on their quest to find the perfect planet. They saw many planets, each one unique and special in its own way. And even though the moon thought they were all beautiful, he could sense that none of them was the right one for him. The star said he shouldn't give up. He agreed and said he was really enjoying their time together. The star said she was too, and twinkled more brightly. They continued on and travelled through more spectacular universes. The moon was having such a lovely time with his new friend, and he didn't mind at all that he still hadn't found his perfect planet. But then they travelled to a universe that felt different to all the other ones. Much, much different. The moon could feel the magic of it. As with the other universes they had been to, there were many planets to look at, but this one had an enormous star, and the planets there were moving slowly around it. It was the biggest star that the moon had ever seen, and he felt the gentle heat of it flowing over him. He asked his friend what the big star was called. The star twinkled and said, "It's called a sun. And this part of the universe is called the solar system. Other universes have suns, but there's only one here. If you look closer at those planets, you'll see that some of them have moons above them." "Oh, wow," the moon replied. He couldn't think of anything else to say. He felt a warmth flowing all through him, and he glowed even more. "Would you like to talk to those moons? Perhaps you can travel around their planets with them and see how you feel." The moon said he would like to do that, but he wasn't brave enough to talk to the other moons. His new friend said she could ask the moons for him if that was okay. The moon said he would like that and thanked his new friend. She really was a great friend, the best a moon could have. The twinkling star and the glowing moon moved over to one of the planets. It had a huge, swirling circle of red gas in the middle of it, and many, many moons. The star said hello to the moons and asked if her friend could join them for a trip around their planet. "Sure," the nearest moon said. "There are 79 of us, and we always have room for one more." The glowing moon joined the others and had a lovely time travelling around the huge planet. His star friend stayed nearby and watched his journey. When he'd been all the way around the big planet, he said thank you to the moons and joined his star friend. She could tell by his expression he'd had a lovely time with the other moons, but that the big planet wasn't the right one for him. "Never mind," she said. "We'll soon find the right one." The moon agreed and said he knew they were getting closer to the perfect planet because he could feel it in his heart. They visited the other moons that were circling their planets. The moons were extremely friendly and invited the glowing moon to join them for a while. The glowing moon had a wonderful time going around each planet with the other moons, but he knew he still hadn't found the right planet. But he wasn't concerned, because he knew he was getting closer and closer to finding the perfect one. As the twinkling star and the glowing moon moved away from another planet that was lovely but not quite right, the star asked if they should leave the solar system and try another universe. The glowing moon didn't answer, because his attention had been fully captured by a beautiful planet in the distance. At first sight, the planet seemed to be completely blue in colour, but when he looked closer, the moon saw glimpses of green on it too. There was something so very captivating about the planet, and the glowing moon couldn't look away from it. He asked the star what the planet was called. She said, "It's called Earth. It's quite beautiful, isn't it?" The moon said it was very beautiful. He asked if Earth had any moons, and if so, he would ask if he could join them on their journey around the beautiful planet. The star said Earth didn't have any moons. She moved closer to her friend and said softly, "But I think it would like one. Why don't you go over and say hello and ask if you can travel around it?" This time the glowing moon didn't feel any shyness at all. Even though he had only just seen the lovely planet, it already felt like a friend. He moved through the dark sky and over to the blue and green planet. His star friend followed him, twinkling brightly. The moon realized the planet was even more beautiful close up. He saw vast oceans, majestic mountains, glimmering gold deserts, and lush green forests. Using his moon magic, he listened to the soft sound of the ocean waves lapping upon the shores, and the gentle wind whispering through the trees of the forest. The soothing sounds filled his heart with love. The planet noticed the glowing moon and said hello to him. The planet's voice was full of warmth and love. She said she'd been waiting for the perfect moon for many years, and now here he was, the most perfect moon of all. The moon glowed and glowed. He asked, "How do you know I'm the right moon for you?" "I can feel it in my heart, at my very core," the planet replied simply. The moon gazed at Earth and felt the love in his heart growing and growing. The planet said to him, "May I ask, would you like to be my moon?" "Oh, yes. I would like that so very much. Yes, please," the moon said. He shone more brightly than he ever had done before. He looked back at his star friend and asked her to come closer. When the planet saw the twinkling star, she said, "Hello. May I say you are the brightest, most beautiful star I have ever seen. Would you like to be the brightest star in my night sky? You would be the first one to appear every night, and you'll never be far away from your moon friend." The twinkling star said she would love to stay in the sky above Earth. Upon hearing her words, the moon felt even more love fill his heart. The glowing moon and the twinkling star took up their positions above Earth. The moon told the star he felt like he had finally found his home, and he was so glad he was sharing it with her. The star glittered and glimmered and said she was so very glad they had met. Earth explained how she travelled around the sun and during her journey, the moon would travel around her. She said it was a kind of celestial dance that the planets and the moons did, and once the moon got used to it, the movements would become very natural to him. She explained about an invisible force that came from her center, which would hold the moon in place above her sky. She said, "It's a bit like an invisible hug between us, which means you will never drift away from me." The glowing moon listened carefully to every word the planet said. He liked the idea of being held in an invisible hug by her, and it made him feel so very happy and loved. The beautiful planet talked some more and told the moon and the star about how she would evolve over the coming years, and how sometimes her lands and oceans would change positions. Her voice softened, and she said, "In years to come, life will appear and thrive in the oceans, on land, and even in the sky." The moon and the star looked at each other and smiled. What an amazing time they were going to have with the beautiful planet. The planet said, "I am extremely glad you have joined me on my journey around the sun. If you have any questions about anything, please ask me, and I'll do my best to answer them." The moon knew he would have plenty of questions as time went by, and he knew the planet would answer him, for he sensed the wisdom in her. He also sensed the love and kindness that flowed from Earth and out into the universe. And so their journey began. The blue and green planet travelled slowly around the sun with the glowing moon and the twinkling star close companions. The moon glowed brightly and cast his golden beams of light across the surface of the earth. Each moonbeam highlighted the beauty of Earth and made the moon love the planet even more. The moon saw his reflections in the vast oceans, the flowing rivers, and even in puddles after the rain. His loving connection to the beautiful planet grew deeper and stronger. Time went by, and the moon and the star watched in wonder as life began to evolve on the planet below them. They saw life in the oceans appearing, and were amazed at how different the creatures were from the tiny fish that darted along the ocean floor to the huge whales that swam majestically through the waves. They watched birds soaring through the sky, blissfully caught on a breeze and letting the wind take them outwards. They witnessed animals appearing on the land, those who lived in jungles, and those who set up homes in snowy landscapes. The moon and star often watched the animals who came out at night, the ones who gazed lovingly at the glowing moon and the twinkling star in the dark sky. The beautiful planet continued to provide everything that was needed for those who lived on her lands and in the ocean. The moon continued to glow, and the star continued to twinkle. Many more years passed, and humans started to appear on the planet. They were completely different to anything else the moon had seen before. Not only did they begin to travel around the planet and set up homes in many different places, but whenever he appeared at night, the humans would stop what they were doing and look up at him in wonder and admiration. Their love for the glowing moon rose from the planet and flowed over him. He glowed and glowed, and just when he thought he couldn't possibly glow any more, the kind humans did something else. They started to create art that showed their deep love for him. They painted pictures of the moon in many different settings, over towns, above the oceans, and peeping through branches of tall trees. They wrote poems about him, expressing their love for his beauty and the light he brought to the world. They wrote stories too, long ones filled with adventure and unforgettable characters, and shorter ones that they read to their children at night as they snuggled down in their beds. The moon heard every word, and he beamed brightly in the night sky. The kind humans wrote songs about him as well, and sometimes they would sit on grassy hills at twilight and share their wonderful melodies with him. Many people danced beneath the light of the moon, falling in love with each other, and also falling deeper in love with the moon. Every night he would hear the children of the planet sending out soft calls of, "Good night, moon, sweet dreams." The moon would send an extra moonbeam over their homes and silently wish them good night and sweet dreams too. There came a time when some of his human friends travelled through the sky on a rocket and landed on his surface. He was so very pleased to see them and made them as welcome as he possibly could. Sometimes his magical moon friends came to visit him. When humans appeared on the planet, the moons used their magic to make themselves invisible because they didn't want to confuse the people below. The other moons agreed that Earth was a very special planet. The kind humans sent their love and appreciation to the stars too, and created pictures, poems, and songs about them as well. And just as the sun had said, the moon's star friend was always the first star to appear every night. When the people saw her, they would make a wish upon her twinkling light and send love her way. Hearing their wishes made the star twinkle even more, and seeing his friend twinkle made the moon glow even more brightly. The moon was so glad he had made the journey through the universes in search of the perfect planet, and he felt so very thankful to be able to share his special light with all those who lived on the planet. He loved them so very dearly, and he knew from the love that came his way that they loved him too. That love continued to make him glow and glow and glow. It's time for Luna's Lost Moon by Alicia Ainsley. It was a cool summer's day in mid-July when Bertie and Bobby hopped on down to the lake at the edge of the forest, never expecting what adventure was in store for them that day. The sun was high in the sky, smiling down on all the citizens of the forest below, and Bertie, the grey-haired rabbit, wanted to run and play. Hopping giddily through the forest, over flowers, under hanging branches and through lush green bushes, he eventually came upon a warren tunnelling deep underground. Peeping his little head into the hole, he called out, "Bobby, Bobby, come out and play." After a few moments, he heard the sound of rustling, and he saw his friend's furry face peep out from the warren. "Hello, Bertie. What a beautiful day it is. The sun is so beautiful today, it seems as though it will never end." "Then let's get out and make the most of it," Bertie exclaimed, turning on his heels and hopping off. Bobby shuffled his way out of the warren, head to fluffy tail, and followed Bertie as he hopped off through the forest. The pair ran with such speed and uncontained glee, with their floppy ears billowing behind them in the wind. The birds chirped overhead, cheering them on as they raced the neighbouring bunnies to the lake. Eventually, Bertie and Bobby made it to the edge of the lake, where they took a moment to drink and freshen up. The lake was busy today with the woodland creatures all sunbathing along the banks. It seemed like everyone was wanting to make the most of the glorious sun today. The lake looked dazzling as the sun's rays reflected off the surface of the water, creating an iridescent glow of sparkling light. The fish of the lake appeared to be delighted by all the attention of their large audience today, and were performing quite the show. On a normal day, the fish lazily swam around the lake, rarely emerging from under the surface except to say hello on occasion to a sunbathing frog. But on this occasion, the fish were pulling out all the stops to entertain the crowds of animals that had gathered around their home. Bertie and Bobby giggled as they watched the fish fly through the air, swapping places with one another and creating formations in the air, all perfectly synchronized like a choreographed dance. "I always knew the fish were secret show-offs," Bobby whispered to Bertie, and they laughed fondly. The colourful fish were performing remarkably well today. However, Bertie's favourite of the fish in the lake were the silverfish that came out at night. Under the blanket of night, in the moon's beams, when everyone else had gone to bed, the silverfish would propel themselves out of the water and perform the most unbelievable cartwheels, somersaults, and turns in the air, before landing gracefully back in the water, barely leaving a ripple behind. During the day, they remained below the surface of the lake, resting and preparing for the goddess Luna to bring out the moon to its rightful place in the sky, when they would finally emerge and take their place on centre stage. Often, Bertie would sneak away on a night from his cosy family warren to come and lie by the side of the lake and watch the silverfish perform their spectacular show in the spotlight created by the moon's beams. He liked to think that the silverfish put on this show specially for the goddess Luna, to thank her for all the moon did for the world and the peace and tranquility that it brought. Bobby looked around the sides of the lake for a spot for them to lay, but there didn't seem to be a prime spot anywhere. "It's too busy here," Bobby sighed, looking round for a spot to relax. "Let's head over to the reeds and see if we can find somewhere to rest there." The fluffy duo hopped off around the backs of the resting deer, the bathing otters, and the napping herons, in search of the reeded area, hoping they could find a spot to relax around there. Where the reeds stood, it was sheltered from the brightness of the sun, and there was a soothing, cool breeze rushing through the reeds, swaying them gently from side to side. It was much better here. Bertie and Bobby slinked effortlessly through the tall, grassy plants until they came upon the bank of the lake. There was a perfect patch of sand, ready and waiting for them. It was totally undisturbed, with no one else around, and it was the ideal bunny-sized area for them both to lie down and stretch out long, all the whilst dipping their toes in the calming, cool waters of the lake. Bertie and Bobby sat themselves down in their secret spot and sighed with relief. What a glorious day it was. They lay there, resting their eyes, hearing nothing but the gentle rustling of the reeds rocking in the wind, the distant chirping of crickets, the occasional bird song from the nearby trees, and the soft ebbing and flowing of the water on the shore. After a while, Bobby's ears began to gently twitch as they picked up on a new noise breaking through the lull of soothing sounds around them. It was an unusual sound, one that he hadn't heard before. Rolling over, Bobby gently nudged Bertie to gain his attention. "Bertie, did you hear that?" he whispered. Bertie yawned a great yawn and stretched his little body out. He had happily dozed off and was not too pleased to have been disturbed by his friend so soon. "What are you talking about?" Bertie asked begrudgingly. Bobby paused and listened closer. The strange sound was coming from through the reeds to their left. Holding his paw to his lips, he hushed Bertie and beckoned for him to follow silently. The two bunnies crept through the reeds, following the strange sound. Eventually, they came to a new part of the lake that was completely shaded by large, overhanging trees. It was so covered that you could be forgiven for thinking that night had fallen on just this area of the lake. The waters were completely still here, with not a flying fish to be found, and on the edge of the waters sat a woman. The woman had bright white, long hair that cascaded over her shoulders and down her back to the floor. She wore a long, sparkling silver dress and a silky shawl that was held on by dazzling diamond beads that spiraled up and down her arms, all the way to her fingertips. She was very beautiful, but there was something wrong. Her purple eyes glistened with longing, and her brow was furrowed with concern. Bobby tilted his head to the side. "What do you think is the matter with her?" he said to Bertie. "Well, how am I supposed to know?" Bertie replied, ever the practical one of the pair. "Let's go ask her." And with that, Bertie pushed his way out of the reeds where they hid, and hopped over to the side of the mysterious woman. Bobby followed behind, curiously. The ethereal woman turned her head to the tiny bunnies by her side, forlornly. "Hello, miss," Bertie said softly. "My name is Bertie, and this is my friend Bobby. We couldn't help but notice you seemed troubled. Is there any way we can help you?" The woman smiled at them kindly. "Oh, bless you," she replied with a husky, deep voice. "I don't think you can help me, sweet bunnies. I have lost something very important, and I have searched with all my might, but I just can't find it." Bobby crept closer to the woman and suggested sweetly, "Well, maybe we can help you look. We are quite good at finding things, especially if they've fallen underground." The woman laughed gently. "I don't think that what I've lost can be found underground. You see, my name is Luna. I am the goddess of the moon, and I have lost the most important thing to me, the moon itself." Bertie and Bobby gasped. "How could this have happened?" Bertie cried. He couldn't believe he was in the presence of the great goddess Luna herself. Luna began to explain her predicament. She and her brother Helios, the sun god, had quarrelled the day prior. Helios had claimed that there was no need for light in the night. He believed that the creatures of the earth should sleep and wait all night long for his return in the morning, when he would ride his great chariot across the sky, bringing light to the world. He was very jealous of the attention that Luna was receiving from the humans. They had begun worshipping her every full moon, and Helios was concerned that she was attempting to take his place as a great god amongst the humans. In his jealousy, Helios had stolen the moon from its place in the sky and hidden it away so that Luna could not find it and bring light to the world tonight when he would be away. Bertie and Bobby felt terribly sorry for the goddess. The earth needed the moon on a night. Otherwise, how would they find their way in the dark? Bertie and Bobby promised to help the goddess find the moon and return it to its rightful place in the night sky with her. But where would they begin to look? Luna said that she had searched everywhere she possibly could. Unfortunately, Luna could not walk around on Earth anywhere in the direct sun, otherwise Helios would see her and stop her in her tracks. So she was resigned to searching in all the shaded and covered areas for the moon. Bertie and Bobby were determined to help the goddess. So they set out on their own search, vowing to not stop until they had found the moon again. The eager pair were very excited to help out a goddess. The other animals would never believe them, but at least they knew it to be true. Bertie and Bobby retraced their steps around the side of the lake, but couldn't spot the moon amongst the crowds. They called over one of the colourful fish of the lake and asked if a moon had by chance been dropped under the water, but the fish had seen nothing. They knew that Luna would have checked the depths of the forest, as it was shaded for the most part, but she hadn't found the moon lurking amongst the trees or hidden in one of the bushes. So the bouncy duo decided to gather reinforcements to aid them on their quest. They reached out to a family of woodpeckers and asked them to help them in their search. If Bertie and Bobby could cover the land and the woodpeckers cover the sky, then between them, surely they could track down the missing moon. As the woodpeckers soared off into the sky, Bertie and Bobby hopped out to the nearby fields, searching amongst the poppies and the lavender plants. Bobby darted in and out of the poppies, calling out for the moon as he went, but he couldn't find anything. Once he had given up on the prospect of the poppy field, he raced to join Bertie, who had headed off to search the lavender fields. Bertie was still lethargic from his delightful nap by the side of the lake, and the lavender fields were not helping. As he ran through the pretty purple plants, searching for the moon, he found himself yawning more and more as he went. The scent of lavender was so comforting, and he felt all of his troubles and cares melting away as his running gradually became slower and slower. The power of the lavender plants overcoming him. He tried to resist at first, but the sweet surrender of sleep was calling him, and it was such a peaceful feeling that he couldn't help but give in. Bertie was soon fast asleep amongst the lavender, purring gently with every breath, having the sweetest of dreams. Bobby, on the other hand, had been lucky in the poppy fields and had remained true to his mission. As he approached the lavender field where Bertie had gone, he took a deep breath in and recognized the mesmerizing, beckoning, sweet scent of the sleep-inducing plants. He knew that if he went into that field, it was unlikely he would emerge again until he had enjoyed a long, deep sleep amongst the plants. By the time he would awaken, night would have already come, and he would have failed the goddess Luna. Bobby decided to abandon the search of the lavender field and asked a friendly field mouse to stand watch over the lavender field so that when Bertie eventually emerged, he would know to meet Bobby back at the lake. Bobby raced off back towards the forest with no time to lose. Taking a break, Bobby leaned against a large tree trunk and thought hard. He had searched the lake. He had searched the fields. Luna had checked all of the dark spots of the forest. Where could the moon be hiding? The god Helios was clever to have hidden the moon from Luna so well. He knew that she would be limited in where she could search, because if he saw her out in the bright open areas uncovered by the trees, then he would spot her and stop her immediately. And that's when Bobby suddenly had an idea of where the moon could be. Deep in the center of the forest, there was a clearing where the trees parted and a large waterfall stood proud. There were the most beautiful flowers and plants that you couldn't find anywhere else in the forest. They thrived in the sunlight. If Helios wanted to hide the moon somewhere that Luna couldn't easily get to without him seeing her, this would be the perfect place. He would spot her as soon as she set foot in the clearing. Bobby raced off deep into the forest, convinced that he had figured out where the moon was hidden. He ran gracefully over the dirt tracks, dodging trees and fallen branches, leaping over brooks and ignoring the greeting calls of fellow forest creatures. He was on a mission. He was soon joined in his race by the family of woodpeckers they had enlisted for help. As they flew above him, keeping up speed, the mother woodpecker called out, "We have seen the moon, Bobby. It is in the great clearing of the forest." Bobby grinned with pride. "I know. That's where I'm heading right now." Together, Bobby and the woodpeckers journeyed through the forest until they came upon the entrance to the clearing. Bobby had never been to the clearing before, but had only heard of it. It was just as glorious as his mother had once described. The grass was greener than any Bobby had seen. It glistened like emeralds in the sunlight. Beds of flowers of all colours bloomed fully, sharing their gorgeous floral scents with the world. Bobby had never smelt anything so delightful. As he breathed it all in, all the fresh scents of the forest, he closed his eyes and basked in the tranquility of this moment. There were barely any sounds to be heard except the singing of the birds overhead and the trickling of the waterfall. The great waterfall stood proudly with its blue waters gushing over and down the side of the mountain of rocks. The water gathered at the bottom, creating a breathtaking plunge pool that an array of birds were bathing in. A small, bright, multicolored rainbow curved its way from the falling water to the center of the pool. And at the bottom of the rainbow lay the moon. It bobbed in the water, discarded by the jealous god Helios. Bobby was delighted and started to approach the moon. But when he got to the side of the plunge pool, he realized something. The moon was in the middle of the water, and Bobby could not swim. What was he going to do? As Bobby looked around him for someone to help, he noticed a small rowing boat berthed to the side of the waterfall. His prayers had been answered. Bobby hopped on over to the boat. Inside it, there were 2 wooden paddles and a pile of thick rope. It was perfect. Bobby used his head to nudge the boat closer to the water, ready to jump inside, when he heard a little voice cry out from behind, "Wait for me!" Bobby turned around to see Bertie emerge from the forest and enter the lights of the clearing. He was so relieved to see his friend. He didn't want to go on this adventure without him. Bertie met Bobby at the boat and proclaimed, "I had the most lovely dreams in the lavender field, and when I woke, I knew exactly where to find the moon, and it brought me here, to you." Bobby giggled and ordered his friend to jump inside the boat. Once they were both inside, they took a paddle each and rowed their way over to the moon. The moon was far too heavy to pull into their boat, so they decided to make the most of what they had. They pulled up close to the moon and wrapped the thick rope around it, creating a lasso of sorts. They then tied the end of the rope to the back of the boat and began rowing back to shore. They noticed that the sun was growing dimmer in the sky as they rowed, and the day would soon abruptly come to an end. They didn't have enough time to get the moon back to Luna for nightfall, and they weren't sure how they would move the moon once they got it to land. They were only small forest bunnies, after all. Pulling up to land again, Bertie and Bobby pulled the rope holding the moon and brought it to shore. They were so tired from all of the running and rowing of the day, they weren't sure they had the energy to get back to Luna by the side of the lake to let her know they had found the moon. Just as they had almost given up hope of fulfilling their mission in time, the father from the woodpecker family flew out of the forest and landed by their side. Following behind was Luna, the goddess of the moon. While the rest of the woodpecker family had found Bobby, the father had informed Luna and brought her to the clearing too. Luna was ecstatic to see that Bertie and Bobby had found the moon for her. She called out to them from the shade of the forest, "Please bring the moon to me here. If I step out into the clearing, then Helios will see me." Bertie and Bobby looked at one another, worry creeping across their faces. How would they be able to pull the moon across the ground to the forest on their own? But before they could ask, the woodpecker family huddled together and grabbed the rope with their claws. Bertie and Bobby took the end of the rope and, working as a team, the group of tiny animals pulled and dragged the moon from the water all the way across the lush green ground to Luna, hidden beneath the trees. She leapt forward and embraced the moon as if it were an old friend. As she held it, a half-moon crescent began to glow on her forehead. She had been reunited with her purpose and her power source. "Thank you so much, all of you," she said gratefully. "Now I must hurry. Night is almost upon us, and I need to put the moon back in time." Luna leant forward and placed a gentle kiss on the forehead of Bertie and Bobby, and stroked the backs of the family of woodpeckers. Then she wrapped her arms around the moon, closed her eyes, and as the crescent on her forehead began to glow, she disappeared magically in a haze of silver light. Bertie and Bobby were so happy that they had been able to help the goddess Luna, and as night fell and the sun disappeared in the sky, they watched with pride as the full moon shone brightly in its rightful place. Bertie and Bobby decided not to return home that night. Instead, they made themselves a bed by the side of the waterfall with a night sky as their blanket. Stars twinkled overhead, and the moon watched over them, no doubt alongside the goddess Luna. They were exhausted from the adventures of the day, and they curled up close to each other for warmth. As Bertie rolled over to his side, he gazed out at the plunge pool. Miraculously, as if they knew a shoal of silver fish began to gracefully leap out of the water, dancing and twirling in mid-air, before plunging back into the water as if they had never been there at all. Bertie liked to think that this was the goddess Luna's way of saying thank you one last time. As the silver fish danced in the moonlight, Bertie watched them until his eyes grew heavier and heavier, and he could no longer watch as he fell into a much deserved slumber. It was early evening, and the first stars of the night appeared and shone brightly over the streets below. Inside a cosy house on one of the streets, there lived a little boy called Noah. It wasn't time for him to get into bed just yet, and he was playing with his toys in his bedroom. A summer's breeze drifted through his open window, and he heard the sound of an owl hooting. Noah looked up at the window and noticed how bright the stars looked that night. He loved looking at the stars and thought they always looked so magical. He often wondered what it would feel like to be a star and look down at the earth below. What would he see? Would he be able to see other planets? How many stars were up there? Noah smiled to himself. Maybe one day he'd find out. He looked away from the window and carried on playing with his toys. All of a sudden, something flew through the open window and landed with a soft thud on the carpet next to him. Noah's eyes grew wide in surprise when he saw what it was. It was a star, and it was lying right there on his carpet. Noah moved closer to the star. It was a bit bigger than his hand and had 2 pointy legs, 2 pointy arms, and 1 pointy head. It must have fallen from the sky. He didn't know stars could fall. How strange. He looked closer at the star. It wasn't very shiny, and it was pale grey. Noah had always imagined stars would be silver. Whenever he drew stars, he always used his silver crayons to draw them, and sometimes he put silver glitter on them too. Noah continued to stare at the star. What should he do with it? He couldn't just leave it there. Perhaps he should tell his mum. She would know what to do with the fallen star. At that moment, the little star opened her eyes. She blinked 3 times and then said, "Hi." Noah was surprised to hear the star talk, but he said hi back. The star sat up and looked around. She asked Noah where she was. Noah replied, "In my bedroom, in my house, on Maple Avenue. My house number is 25 if you need to know that." The star thanked him for the information and said she'd never been inside a house before and had only seen them from the sky. She smiled up at Noah and said her name was Twinkle. Noah gave his name. Then he asked Twinkle what had happened to her. Why had she fallen from the sky, and had she ever done that before? Twinkle stood up and stretched out her pointy arms and legs. She looked at the window and said, "I've never fallen from the sky before. I didn't even know I could fall. I was up there, as usual, looking down at the earth, and then, all of a sudden, I was flying through the sky and into your bedroom." Noah asked if she'd hurt herself. Twinkle said no, and then she frowned and told Noah she did remember feeling a bit different when she was in the sky a few minutes ago, and wasn't feeling as happy as she usually was, but she didn't know why she had felt that way. Noah nodded in understanding and said he sometimes felt like that, but it didn't last long. Twinkle looked at her arms and legs and told Noah she wasn't usually that colour and was normally silver. She didn't know why she'd changed colour. Noah said, "Maybe when you're feeling a bit unhappy, you might have forgotten how to shine, and that's why you fell. If I put you next to the window, do you think you could fly back to the sky?" Twinkle said she didn't know, but it was worth a try. Noah gently picked up the little star. She felt warm in his hands. He lifted her towards the open part of the window and waited. Twinkle jiggled about in his hands. Nothing happened, and she stayed right where she was. She jumped up and down as if trying to make herself lift off like an aeroplane. Again, nothing happened, and she remained in Noah's hands. Noah said she should try flapping her arms like a bird and see if that helped. Twinkle flapped her arms, but yet again she stayed right where she was. Twinkle shook her head and sighed. She told Noah that although she now knew how to fall, she didn't know how to fly. Noah said, "We'll think of something. If we make you shine again, you might be able to fly." He smiled at the little star. Twinkle smiled back. She looked at the toys on his carpet and asked what they were. "These are my toys," he explained. "You can play with them if you like." Twinkle had never played with toys before and didn't know what to do with them, so Noah said he would show her. First he picked up his yo-yo and made it go up and down on the string. He handed it to Twinkle and told her to have a go. The little star tried her best, but kept getting the yo-yo's string into a knot. Noah said he used to do that too when he first started playing with it. He looked around his room and said he'd find something else to play with instead. Noah went over to his toy box and took out some felt squares that had roads and houses printed on them. He laid them out on the carpet. Then he pulled his toy garage out from under his little desk and put it at the side of the felt squares. Small cars, lorries and motorcycles were parked neatly inside the garage. Twinkle laughed and clapped her little hands in delight. She said, "These are roads. I've seen them from the sky. And I've seen that building too, but I don't know what it's called. Cars and lorries go in and out of it, but they always have their lights on because it's night time when I see them." Noah told Twinkle the building was called a garage. Then he showed the little star how to play with the toys. He pointed to a red car that was parked on the top level of the garage and said, "This is my car. I've been parked there all day because I've been inside my office working at my desk, and now it's time to go home." Twinkle said, "Have you really been in an office all day?" "And what is an office?" Noah giggled and said he was just pretending. Twinkle didn't know what that meant, so Noah kindly explained it to her. Twinkle giggled and said she was going to pretend too. She pointed to a green wagon and told Noah she'd been in her office all day too and wanted to go home. Noah told Twinkle to follow him because he knew the way to their houses. The little star moved closer to the garage and watched Noah carefully. He put his hand on the red car, made a car noise, and reversed it out of the parking area. Then he moved the car over to the lift and put it inside. He used the lever to make the lift go down to the ground. Once it was there, Noah drove the car out of the garage and onto one of the roads on the mats. He told Twinkle to do the same. The star reached out for a green wagon and reversed it out of the car parking space, just like Noah had done. She even made the same car noise. She put the wagon in the lift, used the lever to lower it, and then drove the wagon out. The little boy and the star drove their vehicles along the winding roads until they reached their homes. They parked outside their houses and switched their engines off. Noah told Twinkle she was a good driver. Twinkle grinned and her eyes shone with joy. She said playing with cars was a lot of fun. Noah looked closer at the star and said, "You're starting to shine. Look." Twinkle looked at her arms and legs. She wasn't a pale grey colour anymore, and was now a delicate shade of silver. Noah said she might be ready to fly now, so he picked up the little star and took her to the window again. Twinkle tried to fly, but yet again she didn't move from Noah's hand. She told him she didn't mind that much because she was enjoying playing with the cars and wanted to stay a bit longer. Noah said he had other toys to play with too. He rummaged about in his toy box and brought out his toy farmhouse and some farm buildings. He put them on the carpet. Noah asked Twinkle to reach into the farm buildings and grab the animals who were inside. He put his hand inside a barn and brought out some cows. He made a mooing noise, which made Twinkle giggle. She mooed loudly, which made Noah giggle too. Twinkle reached into one of the buildings and pulled out a couple of chickens, and then a goat, some sheep, and a black and white sheepdog. Noah made animal noises for each one, and Twinkle copied him. Making funny animal noises made them both laugh, and Noah noticed that Twinkle shone brighter and brighter every time she laughed. He told Twinkle she was shining more and asked if she wanted to try flying again, but she said maybe later, because she wanted to play with the farm and the animals. Noah and Twinkle had a great time playing with the farm. They pretended that some of the sheep had got lost, and when the sheepdog went to look for them, he found the woolly animals in the garage, sitting on motorcycles. The chickens went on an adventure too, and travelled in the back of Twinkle's green wagon to the supermarket. And when they got there, they bought some pasta and sauce, because they were going to have spaghetti bolognese for their dinner. Twinkle didn't know what spaghetti bolognese was, but Noah explained what the meal looked like and how delicious it was. He asked Twinkle if she ate anything when she was in the sky. She said no, but when she was back there and looking down on Earth again, she would imagine everyone eating spaghetti bolognese. Noah giggled and said, "Even the owls, and the cows, and the frogs?" Twinkle chuckled and said yes, even them. They played with the farm and the animals for a while longer. Noah noticed how happy Twinkle looked and how she was shining more and more. When they'd finished playing with the farm, Twinkle asked what else they could do. Noah asked, "Do you like colouring in?" Twinkle said she'd never tried it before. Noah collected his colouring in book and a tub of crayons from his desk. He opened the book, found a picture to colour in, and placed it on the carpet. He put the crayons next to it. He lay on his tummy and took a red crayon from the tub. He told Twinkle to pick her favourite colour. She chose a silver one. She lay on her tummy next to Noah and copied him as they coloured in a picture of 3 bears having a picnic. Twinkle was very good and never once went out of the lines. She hummed happily as she used her silver crayon. The teddy bear picture was soon finished. Noah turned the page and came to a picture of children playing outside in a park. Twinkle liked the picture very much and decided to colour everyone silver. Twinkle said she was having a wonderful time and asked Noah if he played all day long in his bedroom. Noah shook his head and said sometimes he went to school. He explained what that was to Twinkle, and he told her about his friends. Twinkle smiled. "Your friends sound lovely. I wish I had a friend." Noah put his crayon down and smiled at her. He said, "I'm your friend." His words made Twinkle shine even more. She said Noah was her friend too. As they continued colouring, Noah asked Twinkle what it was like to be a star. Twinkle said, "I'll show you." She put down her crayon, stood up and stretched out her arms. She told Noah to do the same. Twinkle looked down at the road and the farm on the carpet and said, "This is what I see when I'm in the sky. They don't normally look this big because I'm far, far away when I'm in the sky. But you can pretend to be a star and look down at the roads and imagine you're far away too." She stepped onto the road mats with her arms still stretched out and slowly turned around. Noah stretched out his arms. Then he wiggled his fingers. When Twinkle asked why he was doing that, Noah said he was trying to shine. He wiggled them some more, which made Twinkle giggle. Noah said she was shining very brightly now, and if she wanted to try flying again, he could take her to the window. "Not yet," Twinkle said. "I'm having a wonderful time, and I haven't finished showing you how to be a star yet. Look down at the mats and tell me what you see." Noah looked down and said everything looked different now that he was above it. Things looked smaller. Twinkle told him to close his eyes and pretend he was floating up through the night sky. She said softly, "Feel yourself floating higher and higher. You go past other stars and wave to them. When you're high enough, look down at the earth. Can you see the green fields and the blue ocean?" Noah nodded. Using his imagination, he told Twinkle he could see dolphins swimming in the water, and there was a big ship sailing across the waves. Twinkle said she had seen those things from the sky, and lots more. She told him about the dark green jungles she had shone down on, and mountains that were so tall they were covered in snow. The little star had seen amazing waterfalls flowing down the side of cliffs, and snowy lands where polar bears leapt from one iceberg to another. Noah imagined seeing those things too. Twinkle said it wasn't just the earth that she had seen. She'd seen other planets too. She described what the red planet Mars looked like, and how some planets had rings around them. She told Noah about the endless night sky and the thousands and thousands of stars who lived there. Twinkle talked about the moon and said it was her favourite thing to look at because it always made her feel happy inside. Twinkle spoke more about travelling through the universe and all the things she had seen. Noah pictured himself there too, and pretended he was a star like her, and they were looking at the beautiful full moon together. He felt all warm and happy inside. He opened his eyes and smiled at the little star. He said, "You're shining very brightly now, brighter than any other star I've ever seen." Twinkle said Noah looked like he was shining too. Noah put his hand over his mouth and yawned. He said travelling through the universe had made him very tired, and he would need to get into his bed soon. Twinkle said, "What's it like to sleep in a bed?" "It's great," Noah replied. "I snuggle down in the covers and feel all cosy and warm. Why don't you get in and see what it's like?" He walked over to his bed and pulled back the cover. Twinkle followed him and asked Noah to lift her into the bed. Noah gently did so and put the little star onto the soft bed. He pulled the cover around her until just her face was peeping out. She sighed happily and said the bed was very comfy. Noah sat on a chair at the side of the bed and said, "When I'm in bed, my mum sits here and tells me a bedtime story. Would you like to hear a story?" "I would love to, thank you." Twinkle shuffled about a bit more until she was even comfier. Noah began to tell her a story about a little mouse who wanted to build a little house. His friends wanted to help him, and together they made an amazing house where all the animals could live together. Twinkle smiled and said that was a lovely story, and asked if Noah knew any more. Noah said he did, and told Twinkle another story. This time it was about a magical unicorn who could grant wishes. Twinkle really liked that one. Noah yawned and said he was getting very tired, but there was one more thing he had to do before he fell asleep, because it was something his mum did every night. He leaned over to Twinkle, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "Good night, sweet dreams, I love you." The little star began to shine brighter and brighter. She sparkled and shimmered. She glistened and glimmered. Twinkle shone so brightly that little stars rose from the top of her head and floated around the room. Some landed on the walls and glowed. Others settled on the carpet and twinkled like diamonds. Noah looked around at his bedroom of stars. It looked so magical that he felt like he was in a dream. Still shining brightly, Twinkle rose from the bed and floated in the air. Noah gasped and said, "You've remembered how to shine, and now you can fly back to the sky. How do you feel?" Twinkle said she felt happy and warm and fuzzy all at the same time. And it was because of Noah and the fun they'd had together. The little star floated over to the window and looked out. The full moon shone bright and beautiful in the sky. Noah stood next to Twinkle, and together they gazed at the moon. Twinkle thanked Noah for helping her to shine again. She said she would always be looking down at him from the sky and thinking about their special time together. Noah said he would wave to her every night. Twinkle moved closer to Noah and kissed him on the cheek. She said, "Good night, sweet dreams, I love you." Noah felt happy and warm and fuzzy, all at the same time. Twinkle flew slowly through the window, across the dark garden and up into the sky. Noah didn't take his eyes off her, and when Twinkle stopped high up in the sky, he knew exactly where she was and where to find her the next night. Noah waved, and Twinkle glowed more brightly than any of the other stars in the sky. Noah's mum came into the bedroom and stood next to Noah as he looked out of the window. She noticed the extra shiny star in the sky and said she'd never seen a star twinkle like that one before. She shut the window and closed the curtains. Then she tucked her tired little son into bed and asked if he wanted a bedtime story. Noah yawned sleepily and said he had a special story to tell his mum. He began, "Once upon a time, there was a star who had forgotten how to shine." Oh. Noah yawned again, closed his eyes, and fell fast asleep. His mum kissed him on the cheek and whispered, "You can tell me the rest of the story tomorrow. Good night. Sweet dreams. I love you." Many of you have been asking why on earth we changed our name from Koko Sleep to Koala Moon. If you snuggle up, I will tell you. It all started when Koko mentioned the Koala Moon to me. He said as much as his bedtime stories helped all of you drift off to sleep, really, it was the Koala Moon that did it. And so that should be the show's name instead. This is Koko and the Koala Moon by Susanna McLaughlin. In the heart of Sleepy Forest stands a little wooden cabin. This little cabin has stood there for years, being bathed in sunshine, drummed by rain, and washed in the light of the moon. Within the cabin live a family of koalas, and one little panda too. The littlest koala is named Koko. For years, when the sun began to set, the little koala would yawn and rub his eyes with his paws, and everyone would know it was bedtime. Koko would be bathed in the bubbliest of baths. He would be given a mug of hot, frothy cocoa, and he'd be tucked up in woolly blankets and told a story. This story was sometimes told by his dad, sometimes by his mum, sometimes by Grandma, and sometimes by Auntie Shirley, if she was stopping by in between one of her whirlwind adventures. The night that Koko learned about the Koala Moon, it was told by his grandpa. Koko was little then, not much more than a baby. His brown eyes were especially big and sparkled especially bright when he was sleepy. Grandad pulled up a chair to the side of Koko's bed and flopped down into it with a sigh, taking off his glasses to polish them with his handkerchief. He leafed through the books in Koko's bookshelf and asked the little koala what adventure he wanted to take that night. Would it be exploring the high seas with Atticus the pirate? Flying broomsticks with a magical pair of wizarding twins? Or a simple walk in the park with a couple of friendly dogs? Koko yawned a little tired yawn once more and blinked slowly. "Something different, please, Grandad," he said. "Something new." And so Grandad looked around, racking his brains for something new. His gaze fell out the window and into the sky, where the moon hung round and watchful, sending a gentle silver glow across Sleepy Forest to glint gently against Grandad's round-framed glasses. "Have you heard the one about the Koala Moon?" Grandad asked Koko. Koko shook his head almost imperceptibly as he settled deeper into his pillow. "Well, here's how it goes," Grandad said. "Every night, as the world falls still, the sky pinkens and darkens up until the Koala Moon begins to rise. It yawns and opens up its eyes. If you look very close at the moon above, you'll see someone looking back with love, with two big eyes and a gentle smile. It's the koala on the moon, come to stay a while. The koala watches over sleepy heads as they're all tucked up warm in their cozy beds. She wraps the world in a gentle glow that says, 'Calm down, It's time to be slow. It's time to let your worries float away. It's time to say good night to the day. Drift into dreams and start to snore as the koala moon shines brighter than ever before. Grandad looked down at tiny baby Koko, ready to continue his story, but Koko was already fast asleep, snoring ever so gently and smiling softly. He looked up to the moon and wished it a good night. In the little koala's dreams, a moon was beginning to rise. It was just like our moon, but a little different. It was the shape of 3 intertwining circles, a round face and 2 round ears. It was silver, just like ours, and it had craters on it, but its face was much clearer. There were 2 smiling eyes, a round velvety nose, and a soft pink smile, beaming down at the world. The moon was just like ours, yes, but it was just a little more clearly a koala. Koko sat up in his soft bed and rested his elbows on the windowsill. He looked down at his paws and giggled at how the light from the koala moon turned his fur extra silver and seemed to shimmer and sparkle as he moved his hands up and down. He gazed up at the moon, which seemed to float closer to Earth than ever before. "Good evening, Koala Moon," he called. "Good evening, Koko," she called back. Koko gasped, realizing that the moon had heard him all the way from space. "Can you hear me?" he asked. The koala moon giggled, her laugh as melodic and light as the twinkles coming from the stars. "Yes, Koko," she said. "It's such a peaceful and beautifully still night that I can hear you perfectly." Koko grinned. "Are there not still spaceships zipping about up there, and satellites bleeping and blooping, and shooting stars squealing by?" The koala moon paused to listen to the sounds of space, then shook her head. "Nope," she said. "It's utterly peaceful, completely, beautifully quiet." Koko nodded. Apart from the usual soft trill of crickets and the gentle creaks and rustles of the old moonlit trees, Sleepy Forest was silent too. "Can you see the whole of Sleepy Forest from up there?" he asked. "In fact, I bet you can see the whole world from up there." "Only the parts where my moonlight falls," the koala moon said. "Only the places where it's night time. But yes, I can see a lot. I can see all of the sleepy little creatures tucked up in Sleepy Forest. I can see Fudge the sloth snoozing in a tree, and Whiskers, Pebbles, and Paws the little otters floating down Sleepy River on their backs. I can see lots of little cabins where little night lights shine and little glow-in-the-dark stars gleam on the ceilings. It really is peaceful. And that's thanks to me. That's my job, Koko, you see. I hang up here in the sky and shine across the world, making everybody sleepy. If I wasn't here, Munchie would still be riding around on his pizza-mobile. Hector and Sunny would still be digging in the garden, and Disco would be out dancing. But when they see me, everybody begins to yawn. They know it's time to cuddle up, snuggle down, and begin to dream. Koko smiled. Just like every night? He asked. Just like every night. From then on, every time Koko saw the silver shining moon, he'd send a sleepy smile to the koala he knew lived on its face. And sometimes, when he needed it, he spoke to her again. It made him feel safe and loved to know she was always watching over him. One night, when Koko was older and had just gotten his pink ukulele, he slipped into another dream and once again looked up to the Koala Moon. He sat on a little wooden rowboat amongst golden fireflies and wrote a twinkling lullaby. The notes drifted all the way up on the soft, warm breeze to the Koala Moon, who thanked Koko for his song. You must get tired of having songs written about you, Koko chuckled. And the moon giggled but said no, she'd never tire of hearing people sing about her. In another dream, an even older Koko took a trip in his Auntie Shirley's rocket and twirled and whirled around the Koala Moon, making her laugh as he did loop-the-loops and floated mid-air in his spacesuit. One night, in the run-up to his first day at Kookaburra Kindy, a little tiny Koko tossed and turned until he fell into a dream where the Koala Moon was in the sky, hanging her washing amongst the stars. Excuse me, he called to the Koala Moon. She smiled down at him, never too busy to make time for her little koala friend. I don't think I'll be able to sleep very soundly tonight, he said. I'm going to Kookaburra Kindy tomorrow, and I'm a little bit scared. What if no one likes me? What if I'm not smart enough, or arty enough, or not good enough at sports? The Koala Moon shushed Koko with a smile. It's okay to be nervous, Koko. She frowned. When I come out at night, I try to bring peace and quiet and sleepiness. But some people say nighttime can also bring a little worry. Some people find that without the busyness of the day, their heads can get a little busy and full, and they start thinking about what might happen tomorrow. But Koko, everything is going to be okay. If you ever feel unsure, I want you to look at me and remember that you're a smart koala. You're a brave koala, and you're going to do your best. And if things go wrong, I'll see you tomorrow night, and we can just giggle about it then, okay? Koko nodded. Okay. Every time he looked up at the moon from then on, he imagined her telling him those things. He would even repeat them to himself. He would say, I'm a smart koala. I'm a brave koala. And I'm going to do my best. Everything is going to be okay. And everything was okay. The night after Koko started Kookaburra Kindy, he looked up at the Koala Moon from a dream drifting amongst marshmallow clouds and laughed. He told her he'd met a little hedgehog called Prickles, and a little chameleon called Camo, who he thought he'd be friends with forever. He told her that they sang songs and played games and made up stories. He told her about how he got finger paint all over his fur, and everybody thought he looked funny. The Koala Moon grinned and said she'd have found that funny too. The night that Koko's new adopted sister, Kira, arrived at his house, Koko looked at the moon again. He had a very important question to ask her. When he drifted off and found himself floating on a lilo in a swimming pool made of hot cocoa, he looked up, and once again the Koala Moon was up there, humming to herself and knitting a scarf from the smudgy trails of the Milky Way. "Koala Moon?" he asked, and she looked down at him over her soft nose. "Oh, hey, Koko," she said. "What's up?" "I was just wondering," Koko asked, taking a sip of the mug of hot chocolate he was holding in his paw. "You're the Koala Moon, right? So you watch over me. But I have a new sister now, and she's a panda. Will you look over her, too?" The Koala Moon laughed. "Yes, Koko, I will look over Kira. I look over anybody who needs me," she said. "In fact, she's just drifting off now. Here she comes." Koko heard a whee and saw his sister riding down the curling water slide to land in the hot chocolate pool. "This is the best dream ever," she called, waving to Koko as she paddled in the warm chocolate. Sometimes Koko would see the moon in the daytime. You know, when the sky is a gentle blue and the sun is behind a cloud and you look up to see a little sliver of moon and wonder what she's doing up. Koko knew what she was doing up. The Koala Moon was just popping by to check everyone was doing okay. Sometimes he'd see her on an afternoon when something wasn't going so well, when he was finding class hard, or when he couldn't win a game, or when he'd just woken up wrong and everything was making him grumpy. He'd glimpse the Koala Moon and know that she was trying to tell him that everything would be fine. He'd then look at himself in the mirror and say, "I'm a smart koala. I'm a brave koala. And I'm going to do my best. Everything is going to be okay." And it always was. He asked his granddad once whether he ever spoke to the Koala Moon, and he said yes. He said he even sang to her sometimes. He said he'd looked up at the Koala Moon the day he graduated Koala College and known he was on the right path. He said he'd asked Grandma if she'd marry him under the Koala Moon, and he swore he heard the moon cheer when she said yes. He even said that the day Koko was born, the Koala Moon was full and bright in the sky above the hospital. One night, after Koko and his friends had spent the evening at the Sleepy Forest Circus, they were sitting on the front porch of the koala's cabin, wrapped in blankets and sipping hot cocoa. Koko looked up at the moon and waved. "Do you see the face on the moon?" he asked his friends. They squinted up at the shining orb in the sky and all murmured and nodded and hummed in agreement. "Do you know that face belongs to a koala?" Koko said. It's the Koala Moon. She's always watching over us and making sure we're okay. His sister Kira wrinkled her little panda nose and asked if he was sure it was a koala moon. She thought it was a panda. Prickles the hedgehog giggled. He said he'd always known that as the hedgehog on the moon. Didn't they see its snuffly little pointed nose? Camo grinned and said he thought the face on the moon was a chameleon. He pointed to a constellation of twirling stars. Those there make up his tail. From his rocking chair, Koko's granddad chuckled. Humans even call it the man on the moon, he said. But whoever's right, everyone has one thing in common. The moon is always there, watching over us and letting us know that it's time to go to bed. And we know that we can yawn and cuddle and drift off to dreamland, safe and loved, as long as the moon is up above. Koko asked Grandad if he could tell them the story again, just like he told Koko all those years ago. Grandad nodded and began. Every night as the world falls still, the sky pinkens and darkens up until the Koala Moon begins to rise. It yawns and opens up its eyes. If you look very close at the moon above, you'll see someone looking back with love. With two big eyes and a gentle smile. It's the koala on the moon, come to stay a while. The koala watches over sleepy little heads as they're tucked up warm in their little beds. She wraps the world in a gentle glow that says, calm down, it's time to be slow. It's time to let your worries float away. It's time to say good night to the day. Drift into dreams and start to snore as the koala moon shines brighter than ever before. Up on her surface, glowing like pearl, there are little creatures beginning to stir. All the way up in twinkling space, little koalas run across the moon's face. Little fuzzy creatures, all silver and small, live in her craters, playing chase and moonball. Whilst the earth koalas are tucked up tight, the moon koalas play all through the night. The koala moon smiles as she watches over us all, every human and creature, whether big or small. From the koalas in space to the ones on the earth, all the children in bed, from London to Perth. She rolls around the stars and sings from the sky, making friends with comets as they rush by. She chats to the sun and says hi to rockets, handing out candy she keeps in her pockets. She sends out her love into the whole of space with a gentle smile on her koala face. If you listen carefully when it comes to bedtime, she'll read you a story a poem or rhyme. She'll send you to places far, far away with stories that lead you to dreams, then to day. If she's not there in the morning, don't you worry. When the sun goes down, she'll be back in a hurry. For now, she'll be sleeping in her own starry bed, knowing that you are watching out for her instead. When he finished his story, he smiled to see Koko, Kira, Prickles, and Camo all snoozing where they sat. He looked up at the Koala Moon and winked. "You've worked your magic again," he said, and the Koala Moon winked back. So, that's the story of why Koko's sleep became Koala Moon. Because Koko thought we should all know about the Koala Moon. Because she helps him sleep easy every single night. And she might help you too. The Koala Moon is out there right now, shining on the world and bathing it in calm. Can you feel her? Her twinkly eyes shining in the sky, her big velvety nose and little peaceful smile, letting you know that you are loved and safe and sleepy. Every time you look at the moon, give her a wave and remind yourself, I am safe, I am loved, I am sleepy under the Koala Moon.